some reason I can only see you. I can't see myself, but you can still see me good?
Yep, I can still see you.
Okay. It's just the top screen's not working, which is fine. I
Yeah.
don't need to see myself. I just make sure you can see me.
Yeah, no, I can see you just fine. All right, so the topic for tonight, um, which we have Murphy's Muskets here. Let's see. Fix something real quick. Okay, yep, that should work. Okay. Um, is Son of the Morning Star, which is one of my favorite movies. And I think it does a pretty good job at telling the story of Custer from when he gets out west all the way up to Last Stand Hill. Um, I sort of expect the comment section because we did there was a live stream last what was it, a couple days ago, Wednesday, um, on the 11 Bang Bang channel that got a little, I wouldn't say heated in the comments, but it was definitely, people had opinions.
What were you guys talking about?
Well, it was mainly on the firearms section, but a lot of it was it sort of turned into the, I guess, aspects of the battle, which I would feel like any conversation about Custer or the weapons used at Little Bighorn would eventually turn into that. But
Gotcha.
I am of the opinion that he was essentially failed by Benteen and Reno. I feel like there was a animosity between the three, or some kind of rivalry, or you know how that goes.
As far as history is concerned, I will have to defer to your understanding because I actually, you know, other than what you learn in public school and the basics of the battle, I actually don't know much about the Battle of Little Bighorn. I know about the problems with their trapdoors and being outnumbered, all the basics,
Yeah.
but I have never really dived that deep into it before.
Oh, it's like one of my favorite battles.
And I've
I,
never seen the movie before either, but now I'm watching the your little short you got going, and it looks like it was a good movie.
it was pretty good. I think it came out in '93. I think it was being filmed right along the same time as Dances with Wolves was
Hmm.
being filmed. So I think it had a lot of, I don't want to say like the same associate producers or whatever, but I think some people worked kind of hand in hand on both films. Um,
Gotcha.
but no, I think the movie does a pretty good job at balancing the native point of view as well as the, like, American cavalry or U.S. Army like point of view, or Custer's view. There we go. That's probably more like it. Um, and so yeah, it just kind of shows a lot of the problems they had, and apparently Benteen had a really big problem with Custer after the Battle of the Washita River. Um, some guys got cut off, and Custer more or less left them there, and they were killed. Um, all right, so we already have. I think his name is called Gilead Guerrilli. He says horrible historical accuracy. I don't know if I agree with that. Can you explain in the comments section? Um,
People go way hard on movies, like especially like last time we talked about the Patriot,
yeah,
and I was talking about how cinematically it's beautiful, the uniforms are beautiful. You see everything you want to see. You see Fusiliers, Grenadiers, you see cavalry.
yeah,
You even see line closers carrying pikes, which was still common during the
mm-hmm,
Revolution. But people are gonna always be like, well, actually, they were using Hardy's drill instead of Gillum's. And it's like, okay, guy, I get you, but the movie is not about showing you proper drill and infantry tactics.
yeah,
They every single scene in any movie has to do double, triple, quadruple duty in terms of every minute of a film costs tons of money. So dialogue's got to be doing something. What you're being shown's got to be doing something. The music
Yep.
and everything happens as far as a good movie very purposefully. And I should have went into it more during the Patriot when we were talking about it, but that was the criticism that I heard later, and I was like, I get, my guy, that they weren't, they weren't doing authentic colonial drill,
Yeah.
but that's not what the movie was trying to show.
Yeah, that would have
And
been an incredibly boring.
and yeah, and some movies, yeah, they do a better job at it than others. Like The Patriot was better than Sylvester Stallone's 1776. I don't know if you've seen that,
No, I
but
didn't even know that he made a historically accurate movie, or even something that would be historical.
yeah, yeah. And there were no time travelers in The Patriot in terms of uniform out of place, gun out of place.
Yeah.
Some of those older movies, especially like westerns, like what we're going to talk about tonight, you see a lot of time travelers.
Yep. Oh yeah.
So,
Um. Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, I want to say there's like five different native tribes that were there, and they had to represent or like do their best to represent all of the different characteristics, like from body paint to the way they did their hair to the way the weapons they used, the way they painted their horses. That's a lot of detail for a. I think this was a mini series wrapped up into like a 3 hour movie, and
mhm.
maybe it was like two parts. But that's a lot of detail they had to go to research, and then also um, I think they relied heavily on reenactors for the U.S. Cavalry, and of course, they're going to do stuff that most of the soldiers would have done back in the day. They would have learned that and how to set up their tents, how they wear their uniforms, things like that.
Mhm.
I thought it was pretty well historic, like as far as uniforms and weapons and things like that went. I thought it went very well, and I didn't think that they over exaggerated the spent the cartridges getting stuck in the trapdoors.
Gotcha.
Um, in the movie at least.
Yeah, I
So
can see in the short it's showing the guy ejecting the rounds from his trapdoor and that they're
yeah,
coming out properly.
yeah, there is like one scene where one guy's having to dig one out, but it wasn't like over exaggerated. Um,
Yeah. And I'm not the historical expert on this battle, but if you look at old brass, old 4570 brass, I can bet that towards the end of the battle, when their guns were really hot, it probably became a problem because old brass was thin, and
yeah.
when the chamber heats up and everything, I'm sure they did have a problem with stuck cartridges. Now, was it as bad as people talk about? I don't know, but I could definitely see it becoming a problem when your gun gets super hot.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I could.
And the trap door doesn't have super strong ejection. I'm pretty sure that's why they moved away from it so quickly, right? It was because of the complaints about ejection.
That was definitely one of the complaints for it. Yeah. Let's see. But yeah, like I mean, I've shot a trapdoor before, and like I think twice. One was a carbine, the other one was the rifle. The
Yeah, I saw your
rifle,
recent video of it. That was pretty cool.
yeah,
You guys were shooting it at a very long distance, like 300 yards.
that's a long distance for me. Yeah. Now I don't
Yeah,
know like as far as other shooters, but yeah, I mean I think it was 350 yards, and it was um,
for a full stock military rifle, that's a long ways.
yeah. uh, I didn't have which I think that was the 1880 model, so that was 4 years after these. Um,
Mhm.
I didn't have a problem extracting, but I also wasn't, having arrows shot at me, and I hadn't fired a couple hundred or numerous rounds. I think I had a max like 20 rounds, which I think
Yeah.
typically soldiers were carrying around 60, and by time Last Stand Hill was around, they were probably pretty low on ammo. So the barrel and the breech were probably pretty warm at that point, and yeah, the stress factor would have been significantly higher.
Yeah,
Um,
well, and when you're in, action like that, things happen. As a reenactor, when I'm standing on a flat range, my 1861 percussion musket works perfectly every time. But just reenacting, and we're not even loading a full charge, we're just doing reenactor blanks.
yeah,
But when you're out reenacting in the dirt and the weather and the elements or whatever, and again, this isn't pitch combat, it's reenacting,
yeah,
but the guns misfire a lot more in the field than they do on a flat range.
it's a good point.
So,
Yeah, yeah, especially because you don't have time to make adjustments. Like if the carbon builds up, or the was it the residue from the black powder builds up, you got time to make adjustments, and it's much more leisurely. Yeah, I guess on a
yeah,
flat range.
yeah,
But
like if the vent hole or if they're that's a problem for cap locks, not for the trap door, but I'm sure the trap door has its little things that have to be adjusted like all black powder firearms do.
yeah,
But with, cap locks, yeah, if it's humid that day, if you get a lot of dust in them or whatever, they get clogged up, the vent gets clogged, and you carry around vent picks and various tools, but you frequently will have people that have to step to the rear because they have to adjust something. I mean,
yeah,
guns go down. Modern guns go down.
yeah, exactly. And I do wonder. I mean, they had been on a force march for several days prior to this. I wonder how much like you were saying, like the dust and stuff like that building up. I wonder how much that would have affected the, the operation of the trapdoor. The Springfield, or
Hmm.
um, the carbine version that I shot several years ago, I think it had a weak extractor on it, and that's just something I noticed. But that was also, I mean, it's like 100 and something year old rifle, so that is to be expected. But yeah, um, let's see. So overall,
The old westerns were the worst. I disagree. I like old westerns. I just don't watch them for historical accuracy.
oh yeah, definitely, definitely not. Those are pure entertainment, especially the Clint Eastwood
Yeah.
movies. 100% just pure entertainment.
My favorite western is Crossfire Trail. And I like that one because Tom Selleck westerns don't have any time traveling firearms. They are all authentic reproduction, Ubertis. It's got some really interesting guns that are shown in Crossfire Trail.
Yeah,
And as far as the details, the costume, the clothing, like all that is really cool. That's my favorite western.
I would say my favorite western has to be a cross between Dances with Wolves is really good. Um,
Man, that movie's too long though. You can't just pop in Dances with Wolves and be like, I feel like watching a western tonight. That movie's
oh no, that is
That's like committing to Lord of the Rings.
that's true. I so all right, so this one's about 3 hours. So yeah, that one's definitely out. I do like the Alamo. I don't know if you've seen the new one with Billy Bob Thornton. I do love that. And I don't know if you classify that as a western. I mean, it does take place in Texas, so it could
Yeah,
be.
no, it's not really a western. Even the John Wayne one's not really a western, even though
Yeah.
there's a lot of time travelers in that in
Oh,
that version. But
I can imagine. Yeah, because
so
that
there's a lot of trapdoors in it made to look like muskets,
were there really?
actually.
It's been so long since I watched that movie.
Yep.
I honestly can't bring myself to rewatch it because I know that John Wayne dies, and like that just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, that's another 3-hour film that, like I said, you really have to be committed to finish it. You could just watch the first half and then not watch it the last half where
Yeah,
they all die.
that's a valid point. Yeah, that's pretty good. But no, this movie is pretty long. It's about 3 hours. I would say it does a pretty good job at what it, which there really hasn't been a whole lot of movies. I guess only like a few about Custer's Last Stand. And so I would say this one definitely does the best. It just, I don't know what it was about the 90s, but they produced some pretty good movies. Because, you had Gettysburg
Yeah,
and things
well,
like
it
that
was the
coming
peak
out.
of reenacting too. That's when people had the most expendable income. There were the most reenactors, that kind of thing.
That's a very good point. I
Like
didn't think about that.
I feel like reenactors today are probably better than they were in the 90s because it's more committed people.
Yeah.
But I definitely, you don't see the numbers. I think the 1990s and early 2000s were like the peak of reenacting in the US.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that, but yeah, that definitely would be a contributing factor.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, definitely the income is not disposable like it was in the 90s.
No.
No, nowhere even close.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get a lot of
Yeah, and
cool,
that's
like,
just the impression I got going to all the 150th Civil War reenactments and listening to the older guys talk that have been doing it since like the 80s.
yeah,
And so they kind of said very similar things that like people doing it now were more committed and that there was more gear because of the Indian makers and all that, but
yeah.
the numbers were just not what it used to be.
I'd say you'd also get, well, nowadays you could probably get better quality stuff because a lot of those guys are selling everything off. So you almost instantly have that campaigner look without
Yep.
having to break it in yourself, so to speak.
Yep.
But so have you ever like so what's your impression on what Custer was like? Like from what you've learned through school and everything, what was your impression of what Custer was supposed to do at the Little Bighorn?
Honestly, in terms of the background of the battle, I'm not even sure. All I was taught is just the basics of how he got himself surrounded and, you know, he got decimated just like what happened with the Zulus.
Yeah.
I actually probably know more about Rourke's Drift than I do about Custer.
We'll have to do a Zulu movie. Well, I mean, yeah, that's like a given. Like that has to happen. Um,
Yeah. I know
so
that's bad, being American and all, but and as it's bad because I love westerns, but I didn't realize until you were asking me earlier about how much I know about Custer, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, other than the basics,
yep.
not much.
So he was a very ambitious dude. He had a pretty good Civil War career. I think he had seven. It was either 7 or 11 horses shot out from under him. So you can make an assumption of he's either really brave or he's really stupid. I don't know how I feel about it. I feel
Or a
like,
mix of both.
yeah, I feel like it's kind of a mix of both. Um, but prior to the the campaign, because what they were doing is they were trying to get the Sioux tribe like kind of contained before they broke off to go to Canada and escape. They wanted to contain them and everything and escort them back to the reservation. So Custer's boss was General Terry, and this is something that like nobody ever brings up, like in documentaries. I don't think I've ever seen it. And for the brief time that I went to college, I had an argument with the history professor because the history professor was talking about how Custer just wanted to go kill Indians, and I was like, that is
Hmm.
definitely not the case.
Hmm.
Um, I was like, have
Fortunately, I didn't get any of that when I was in public school, but I'll bet that's pretty common these days.
it is extremely common. Yeah. So I asked the professor, I was like, have you ever read like what Custer's orders were? And he's like, no, there's no need to. And I was like, so how are you going to get the context of what he was supposed to do? And he's like, well, you don't.
Typical progressive.
Yeah,
No, there's no need to read what they actually thought. I mean, we already know.
yeah. He just wanted to kill Indians and get glory and everything. Um, and I was like, I think he'd be really surprised if he went back and read them. And this was like probably back in 2000 and like 11, maybe, I don't know. So I can't imagine what it's like now. Um, so I've got the orders and I'm gonna pull them up here and put them on the screen. But I'm gonna wait for them to pop up so you can see them too. And it whoops, I just kicked my whole table. Um, it really lays it out. So it says Colonel, the Brigadier General commanding, which would have been General Terry, directs that as soon as your regiment can be made ready for the march, you will proceed up the Rosebud in pursuit of the Indians whose trail was discovered by Major Reno a few days since. It is, of course, impossible to give you any definite instructions in regard to this movement, and were it not impossible to do so, the department commander places too much confidence in your zeal, energy, and ability to wish to impose upon you precise orders which might hamper your actions when nearly in contact with the enemy. So, I don't want to read the whole thing. People can read it. Um, so, General Terry's giving Custer very vague orders. And a lot of this could be because officers at that time like to cover their butts. And if something went wrong, they couldn't really be held at fault. But if something went well, they could be held for giving, great orders.
Hmm.
Um,
It's almost like not much has changed.
it could be said about that, yeah. uh, I also think that they didn't want to box Custer in too much on micromanaging him because I think Custer had proven himself to be a capable leader. I mean, he was promoted to general during the Civil War. He was the youngest general to be promoted. Um, Once the war ended and the army downsized, he lost his rank. Um, but then he was actually demoted all the way down to captain. So that tells you how much the army shrank. And then
Hmm.
once he starts on the plains, he gets up to lieutenant colonel. So his rank kind of fluctuates through time. Um, so with that being said, there is one part in here that I think is very important that is very often overlooked. It's called "Should it be found, as appears almost certain that it will be found, to turn towards the Little Bighorn," talking about the village. Um, as far as the headwaters to the Tongue River, and then turns toward the Little Bighorn, feeling constantly, however, to your left, so as to preclude the escape of the Indians to the south or southeast by passing around your flank. So they were basically telling him, we want you to prevent their escape. At least that's how it
Hmm.
reads to me. And I feel like Custer went and did exactly that because if he had stalled or not acted upon the intelligence, or not the intelligence, because he was told that he was found like the night before. The Indians knew where he was at.
Hmm.
And so he had to act upon that because they were starting to break camp and move. But he had to prevent that based on the orders that were given to him from General Terry, his boss. If he failed the mission and they escaped, that probably would have been a very bad look for the army. So he was kind of forced into that position, I feel like, based on the situation as it played out. I don't think he understood how massive the camp was because, like I said, it was 5 tribes worth of people. And I think it was like 3 to 4,000 warriors that were there going against
Yeah.
about 500 cavalrymen.
I mean, people don't typically walk headfirst into their own graves, so
Yeah.
I can imagine that he had the best of intentions. I mean, just like we were talking about the Alamo, which being a Texan, I do know quite a bit about the Alamo.
Yep. We should
But
have done the Alamo tonight.
the Battle of the Alamo, they didn't go into that thinking that they were going to be surrounded and annihilated. They were just buying time. and they tried everything they could leading up to what ultimately happened to prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until like a few days before the 13th day that they realized that there was probably no getting out of it.
Today is Texas Independence Day, isn't it?
Uh, no, I don't think so. What is today?
Today's the 2nd of
Today's,
March. That's when
oh,
the
yeah.
siege started,
I,
wasn't it? Or pretty close to around now.
See, now you're making me look bad because now I don't know off the top of my head. I'm gonna have to look.
I'm sorry, I did not mean to put you in that spot.
No, that's all right. I'm just playing. Let's see. Let's see when it started. You may well be right. Let's see. February 23rd to March 6th. So
Okay,
we're right in the middle of it.
right in the middle. Okay, because I knew.
Minus a day because today's a leap, or this year's a leap year.
Ah, that's a good point. Yeah, but like you said, I mean, it's not like Custer had a plan of like, well, tomorrow I'm gonna die, so I better make the best of this. Better go down guns blazing. So yeah,
Yeah,
I mean that's definitely something to think about because I think he acted on in the best way possible with the information that he had. Uh, he was tipped off that he had been discovered, but I think that prompted him to act quicker. And then I've seen the argument before where people say that he should have dug in on Last Stand Hill and everything, and I'm like, well, with what time could he have done that? Because he basically got chased out of the village up to Last Stand Hill, and the way the natives described it, when people asked how quickly that specific part happened, like how long that took for Custer and his men to die, they said no longer than a hungry man takes to eat his dinner. Which, if you're a hungry man, uh, I can usually get down a hamburger in less than 5 minutes.
yeah,
Which I mean, I'm assuming it took somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes, maybe, for all of them to be wiped out. I mean, that's pretty quick, but
yep,
yeah, I think so. Like looking back on it, I always had like this image. Let's see if I can pull it up. So before Budweiser became Budweiser, they were what was it, Anheuser Busch, and they made this really epic last Custer's Last Stand painting. I'm sure you've seen it once it pulls up here.
yeah. I saw that in the textbooks actually.
Yep. Actually, I think that's probably where I saw it too. I think my dad had a painting of this somewhere in like his old shop or something. And
Hmm.
this is sort of like the image I had, like Custer had this great last stand. And then I think coming to the realization as I get older that it probably lasted just minutes. And
Yeah,
of course, there's accounts of soldiers, running away and stuff like that, which probably is a natural instinct after seeing all the traumatic events of your buddies being hacked up and scalped. And there was this other image right here. I'll pull up. Yeah, this is like a close up of the image or the painting itself, but over to the right, towards the bottom, there's this guy getting scalped, and that like always stuck with me for some reason. And I think that kind of contributed a lot to why I find the battle so interesting. Is you've got what are supposed to have been pretty elite troops, getting wiped out in a matter of minutes, but that was an interesting touch that they put in that video. I mean, the painting.
yep.
Yeah.
Well, it just wasn't their, just wasn't their day. Same thing happens even today. Like it reminds me of what's his name, Latrell, lone survivor, Navy SEALs. The
Yeah, that's a good point.
the they got their elite Navy SEALs and they got wiped out by a few dozen Taliban. So it
Yeah,
just wasn't their day.
no, no, it wasn't. And I do think a lot of it goes back to Benteen and Reno. I didn't know, so Major Reno, he led the initial charge towards the village, and I don't know if you know his role in it, but he was he was a Civil War officer. At least all three of these, Benteen, Custer, and Reno, they were all Civil War officers, so they had seen combat before. But Reno led the initial charge towards the village. He was drunk during that day's events, and he led a very disordered charge. Actually, he probably had the element of surprise, but he stopped short of the village and set up a skirmish line, and that gave the natives time to assemble their warriors, and they came after him. And he led a very disorganized route to up to Reno Hill. But when he was going through his court martial, it was reported that a lot of his soldiers were coerced into making statements that he was a top-notch officer and he was in fact not drunk. A lot of them later refuted that later on in their lives, saying that they were coerced into saying that. So, you can take that bit of information and do with it as you will. Um, and then Captain Benteen, I definitely think, had a personal grudge against Custer ever since the Battle of the Washita River. And he was not going to stick his neck out to save Custer, in my opinion. Because if we get up to the orders that Captain Benteen was given to from General Custer, or Colonel Custer at that time, to my understanding, these are the only written orders that were issued during the battle. And it says, Benteen, come on, big village, be quick, bring packs. P.S. Bring packs. Signed, Lieutenant Cook, who was like Custer's adjunct.
Hmm.
Now, Benteen was with the pack train, and I think Custer knew what was up and that they needed the ammunition from the pack trains. And Benteen basically sat on that information. It did not come to his aid.
It's happened before.
Yes. Let's see. All right.
Sounds just like General Blucher in the Battle of Waterloo.
I you
Have you
know
seen Waterloo yet?
no, I haven't. I'm really ashamed to say I have not.
Oh my goodness.
I know. I know. Maybe you know what? I've got like a 13-hour drive. I will put it on the phone and I will listen to it. I guess it doesn't help. You kind of need to watch it too, huh?
Yeah, you kind of need to watch it.
Yeah. Yeah. I will. You know what? All right.
And once you start watching it, the problem with trying to do that is you will get engrossed by it because it is a visually beautiful film to look at,
Yeah.
and you will do what you'll start nerding out. You'll start looking at the uniforms and the guns and all the things that we do when we watch those type of movies.
Yep.
So,
So Garrett put down in the comment section, his native scouts and Lonesome Charlie Reynolds told him the day before how big this camp was. He really didn't listen well. Lonesome Charlie told him there was a trail 200 yards wide and 6 feet deep. I wish I need to do more reading on the prelude up to the battle. This is one thing I talked to Ethan quite a bit about. I think Wednesday night. I don't understand why Custer didn't really listen to his scouts, or because that was like his intelligence gathering, right?
mhm.
I feel like they would have been a pretty important thing to have or to listen to. Why else would you have them? Um, that kind of leads into my theory of maybe he did listen to them and he just went ahead on anyway because he was trying to fulfill the orders given to him by his boss. That's the only reason I can see him charging headlong if he knew that the camp was as big as it was being reported.
Yeah, or he may have just thought he knew better, just like Longstreet begging General Lee not to go out across the open field at Gettysburg, and Lee just thought he could do it. Thought he knew better. Thought they could break the Union Army there. They were close to Washington. They wanted it to be over, so he just did it.
Yeah, sometimes leaders have this thing called acceptable risk, and it's a whole decision making process. And I have wondered about Lee, like what made him think it was okay to take that risk. And it's just like Custer, like what was going through his mind to say, you know what, this is a risk I'm willing to take. If he did in fact know how big the camp was,
I
you
think
know,
people in that position get used to taking risks. Now, I think that I don't know much about Custer, but I have often thought, why did Lee make that risk? Two, because he was an older man and a lot more experienced. What would convince him that marching across 2 miles or a mile and a half, whatever it was, of open field under artillery
yeah,
was going to be a good idea? But, from the record that we have with his conversations with not Longstreet, what's the other guy's name?
Pick
Armstead,
You had Lewis Armistead. Um,
yeah, I think it was Armistead that was begging him not to go across the field. I'm blanking now, but there is they wrote in their journals the conversation as best as they could recollect, and he begged him not to, and Lee said something to the effect of, we're here, the enemy's here, let's go.
yeah, yeah, that was a risk I wouldn't take. I think it was Longstreet because he had a lot of hesitation on that.
Yeah, yeah, I can't, I confused the two, but
Yeah, because
whichever
Armistead
one it was.
he took part in the charge, and if I'm not mistaken, I think he got shot right when they got up to the cannons
I think you're right. I think you're right.
because
I got
he
the names.
him and Meade had served at West Point together, and that was like his
Hmm.
dying wish was to basically say hi to General Meade.
Yep. Yeah. No, you're right.
Weird historical fact trivia.
Yep.
um, but yeah, um, definitely need to give the movie a watch if you haven't seen it.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna put it on my list because, like I said, I'd never heard of it. It looks cool. Like you said, it's got that '90s aesthetic to it.
Yep.
The guy's got all those 45-70 rounds in his fingers there. I mean, it looks cool.
I wonder how it would be nowadays if they remade the movie. Would it take like a Hostiles approach, or you know,
It's hard to say. Would Hostels even still be made nowadays?
I don't know.
Even though that movie's only like 5 or 6 years old, would that even be made now? It's hard to say.
Yeah, it is. I don't know, but that's my thoughts on the battle. Um, I know I'm one opinion among many, but
Yeah. I wish I could offer more insight, but unfortunately, other than talking about how this dynamic plays out in other fields, I'm not much help where Little Bighorn's concerned.
man, it's a rabbit hole. Once you go down one, it's you're gonna go down several different others. Um,
Yeah.
it could lead you all the way to how the cavalry was equipped during that campaign, to what the army's grand scheme of things were, to you know I wouldn't say it's a conspiracy, but like the idea that Custer's wife was trying to get him into the White House. Yeah, there's all kinds of crazy theories that go on about it, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
It,
Apparently,
it
when he was
always happens around those type of events too, because the people involved aren't there to say yay or nay
exactly,
after the fact.
yep. It's also easy to blame the dead guy,
Yeah.
but I don't know. He yeah, he took about 210. I think it was 210 he took with him, and yeah, 40 of them left. And now this is one thing that kind of strikes me is so there's 40. Let's see. I think there's right around 40 grave sites that have been identified, or 40 bodies that were recovered or identified as being bodies, um, up there on Last Stand Hill. And I would say that kind of says a little bit something that maybe his guys kind of liked him. Uh, I don't know how many guys would stick around their leader if the odds are definitely not in your favor.
Yep.
But I don't know. That's just me. Um, like I said, I'm one opinion of many. So
Well, from what I've read, there's two schools of thought. Men either stay with you because they respect you or because you positioned yourself in such a way that they can't rout.
yeah. Well, they definitely couldn't really route because they were surrounded. I like when they got routed to that hill, they were pretty well surrounded at that point. And there's a really good documentary. I think it was called Battlefield Detectives, and um, I can't remember what program or like what station or channel produced it, but it showed a
That
lot of
sounds like an old school History Channel show.
it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's who put it out, and it was really good. They went to the historical, I mean the archaeological record, and they identified a number of different shell casings, and they could identify them where they were on the battlefield, and that helped visualize like where the troopers were, where the natives were, and it was amazing because they could pinpoint where that shell casing was found and fired at. Like they GPS coordinated it and everything. Um, they wound up finding one of the rifles that was used based on that shell casing, matched up with the firing pin, indentation, everything, and they took it back to that spot, and it was like really really cool. Um,
Yeah, it sounds like the back when the History Channel was actually the History Channel.
yeah, not how the aliens helped uh,
Build the pyramids.
build the pyramids. Yeah, um,
Yeah. It
really
wasn't
cool.
slaves, bro. It was aliens, trust me.
It was 100% aliens, man. That's what happened to Custer. You know, he got beamed up by aliens.
Yeah.
Um, so no, there's like this, which I'm sure you're familiar with, fugitives. Is it Fugitives Trail from Isandlwana during the Zulu War?
Mm-mm.
The battle before Rorke's
Mm-mm.
Drift.
No, I guess not. I got into Zulu really big,
Yep.
and but I don't know that I looked into the battles that led up to it. I'm trying to think.
All right, we gotta work. We have our work cut out for us, for our Zulu episode.
The problem is I was into this stuff hardcore 6 years ago when I was still uploading.
Yep.
And when you get off of YouTube and you start having kids and you get a house and all these things, your brain goes completely off of all this historical knowledge that you've amassed
Yep.
and it goes into homesteading or whatever else you're doing.
Oh yeah.
And all that information goes out the door. Like I
Yeah.
have the books, I could go get the books, I should rewatch the movie. I could refresh myself fairly quickly, but unfortunately, my recall on things that aren't related to chickens, ducks, geese, and kids right now is not that great.
I completely agree. I since starting these things back up, I have realized how much I have brain dumped just for the exact reasons that you mentioned. So yeah,
Yep,
I can tell you really
yep.
good how to chop wood or things like that.
Yeah,
But
and I can tell you about my philosophy books that I've been listening to while I'm working. We
yeah,
could talk about Enlightenment philosophy really well,
we're gonna.
but
I said we're gonna do a Kingdom of Heaven one, and that's gonna be a like we definitely need to make sure we have like a good 2 hours like slotted off for that because that's
Yeah.
going to be a deep topic.
Yep.
But yeah, no. So anyway, like the battle that led up to Warp's Drift was quite similar to Little Bighorn, where the British Army basically got their butts handed to them. Very similar. You had the case extraction problem. You had which that kind of got refuted over time, but it's basically like 20,000 Zulus attacking a British camp of about 4,000 soldiers. And there was this fugitive trail that led down to a river, and it was very similar to Little Bighorn at Last Stand Hill, where the soldiers, I would imagine at that point, after they've seen their buddies get shot up with arrows or scalped or clubbed to death, probably the trauma that they'd seen, they probably went insane and they took off running. There's I forget the amount. I think it's somewhere between 1 to 20 soldiers are not accounted for, and they talk about how they ran down into a ravine, and that's basically where they got finished off at. Um, I would imagine psychologically they probably lost their mind at that point because the natives talk about um, some of the troopers running wildly in all directions. So that's my 2 cents on probably what happened to those guys. But yeah,
Gotcha.
but yeah, I guess that's pretty much all I've got right now for the Little Bighorn, or for Son of the Morning Star at least.
Yeah. No, I wish I had more to talk about historically, but I think you carried it on pretty good. I like you had the you brought up the orders. I'd never seen those before. That was interesting.
Yeah, not like
So,
I don't know why that is always like overlooked.
hmm
In a lot of the documentaries, or because I think when you bring them up and you really start reading them and looking at them, it kind of destroys the myth that Custer was this bloodthirsty native killer. He
hmm
was just an officer following the um, orders from his boss, basically.
Yep.
But it also shows because it talks later down in the orders how he's going to be supported within the next day or two by two other columns of cavalry soldiers. So it's not like he expected to go out on this alone. He was being supported by other soldiers or by other groups. Um, like it was a whole campaign. It wasn't just Custer going out there and fighting natives. Um,
hmm
it was a well thought out campaign, and yeah, and I think because when you start analyzing the orders, like you can't, yeah, it actually kind of benefits the Custer idea.
hmm
But yeah, I don't know. That's why I wanted to include them. And but yeah, I think that's pretty much all I've got for the movie, really.
Cool. Well, I will set aside some time to watch this movie, and you're gonna watch Waterloo.
Yes, I have to uphold
No.
my end of the bargain.
So
But yeah,
hopefully it's on Netflix or Amazon or something like that.
both this and Waterloo are both on Amazon. I mean,
Oh, it's
YouTube.
on YouTube?
Yeah,
Oh,
for free.
sweet. Even
So
better.
yeah, I think
Sweet.
Lionheart Filmworks has the entire movie that you can watch for free. So yeah,
Perfect.
it's a win-win. Whenever you have 3 hours to sit down and watch a whole movie, but yeah, you can watch it in segments, I guess.
Yep. That's exactly what I'll do.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody watching and all that and joining us for this week's episode. I will hopefully have time next week since we're moving. Um, we'll see if we'll be able to do one for next Friday. I don't know yet. It depends on how much we get done. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next week.